The galaxy had not known war for over 1,000,000 years. To them, conflict was a disease cured long ago, a primitive malfunction in the evolution of intelligent life. The Galactic Council taught that any species capable of violence had simply not matured enough to deserve true membership among the stars. Peace was not a goal. It was a requirement. Entire civilizations were reshaped, their instincts softened, their histories erased, until aggression itself became an alien concept. So when humanity was discovered, orbiting a volatile yellow star on the outer rim, the Council was certain of one thing: this species would either adapt to peace or vanish. Human records were deeply troubling. Thousands of years of constant warfare. Global conflicts. Nuclear brinkmanship. Endless cycles of dominance and collapse. Yet there was also brilliance. Technology rising at impossible speeds, cultures reshaping themselves within generations, societies capable of learning from disaster. The Council believed this only proved humans were close to enlightenment. With proper guidance, they would finally abandon war. The pacification began immediately. All planetary militaries were dismantled within weeks. Orbital weapons were seized. Nuclear stockpiles disassembled. Defense fleets were scrapped. Borders dissolved. Surveillance replaced enforcement. Violence, in any form, became a criminal offense punishable by total isolation. Even self-defense was outlawed. Humanity was informed that survival no longer required force. The galaxy would provide stability, protection, and structure. At first, humans welcomed it. For a species exhausted by centuries of conflict, the silence was intoxicating. Cities grew quieter. Soldiers returned home. Children grew up without air raid drills. Entire industries restructured. Economies shifted away from weapons manufacturing toward trade, medicine, and infrastructure. The dream of permanent peace seemed, for a brief moment, real. Then reality began to fracture. Without military protection, trade routes became vulnerable. Galactic corporations quietly manipulated human markets. Prices soared. Resource shortages appeared where abundance had once existed. Criminal syndicates from pacifist worlds exploited legal loopholes, flooding human colonies with debt contracts, labor traps, and exploitative commerce. Nothing they did was violent. Everything was legal. Human governments protested. The Council dismissed their concerns. Suffering, they explained, was an inevitable stage in moral evolution. Struggle would teach humans humility. Vulnerability would teach restraint. Crime surged. Not violent crime, economic crime. Identity theft. Resource manipulation. Data extortion. Entire cities found their infrastructure remotely hijacked, their energy rationed, their water supply regulated by distant authorities. There was no enemy to fight. Only systems to obey. Human colonies became prey. Predatory species that had learned to exploit pacifist law descended on undefended worlds, stripping them of raw materials, hijacking labor forces, and collapsing local economies. By galactic law, none of this counted as warfare. It was merely trade imbalance. Contractual dominance. Resource redistribution. Human appeals went unanswered. Fear crept into society. Without borders, migration became uncontrolled. Cultural tension erupted. Unemployment exploded. Psychological collapse spread faster than any plague. Depression rates tripled. Suicide rates followed. Entire populations felt stripped of purpose, reduced to compliant components in an immense galactic machine. The Council observed with detached satisfaction. Humans were finally becoming civilized. What they failed to see was the shift happening beneath the surface. Human psychology does not surrender easily. Where other species accept structure, humans question it. Where others adapt by obedience, humans adapt by resistance. Stripped of weapons, stripped of authority, stripped of security, humanity did not collapse. It recalibrated. Underground networks formed across planets. Economists, engineers, psychologists, strategists, data scientists, minds once devoted to military development redirected their intelligence toward survival systems. No central authority commanded them. No hierarchy controlled them. Humanity reorganized itself instinctively, like a neural network under attack. They began mapping galactic trade flows. They learned supply chain dependencies. They dissected political structures, legal loopholes, cultural taboos, and information vulnerabilities. They studied psychology across hundreds of species, identifying fear triggers, pride weaknesses, loyalty fractures. And they waited. Predators struck human colonies again. This time, they did not leave richer. Within days, their trade networks collapsed. Their homeworld economies imploded. Internal revolts erupted as fabricated data leaks exposed corruption, incompetence, and betrayal within their leadership. Financial systems crashed. Supply shipments vanished. Starport access was revoked. Entire civilizations descended into chaos. No violence occurred. No weapons were used. No laws were broken. The predators retreated in confusion, unable to understand what had destroyed them. The council investigated. They found no evidence of warfare. Only economic fluctuation, political instability, cultural unrest. All unfortunate, but natural. Across the galaxy, similar patterns emerged. Any species that exploited human vulnerability soon faced invisible retaliation. Entire empires found themselves isolated, starved of resources, politically fractured, and socially destabilized. None could trace the cause. None could retaliate. There was no enemy to strike. Humanity had begun to fight without being seen. Their societies hardened. Communities restructured themselves around resilience. Education prioritized adaptability. Psychological training became universal. Children were taught crisis management before mathematics. Economic systems were redesigned for redundancy, survival, and rapid transformation. Humans did not rebuild armies. They rebuilt themselves. While other species grew softer, humanity grew sharper. And still, the galaxy believed humans were pacified. They saw no fleets. No weapons. No soldiers. No wars. Only a species struggling to survive under the weight of galactic civilization. They mistook silence for submission. They mistook adaptation for weakness. They did not understand that humans had simply found a new battlefield, one without guns, without ships, without explosions. A battlefield where intelligence replaced firepower. Where psychology replaced strategy. Where survival itself became the ultimate weapon. And in that arena, humanity had never lost a war. Humanity did not announce its transformation. It did not declare rebellion, raise banners, or issue threats. There were no speeches, no rallies, no visible resistance. Instead, adaptation unfolded silently, across millions of minds, in billions of private decisions, inside countless hidden systems. War had been outlawed. So humans built something else. They began by understanding the galaxy. Every trade route was mapped. Every resource stream was tracked. Every political alliance, every legal framework, every cultural taboo was analyzed. Human data networks, once devoted to entertainment and commerce, became engines of strategic calculation. Artificial intelligences processed trillions of transactions, searching for dependencies, vulnerabilities, and pressure points. Sociologists studied alien psychology. Economists dissected interstellar markets. Linguists decoded the emotional structures embedded in thousands of species' communication patterns. Humanity learned how the galaxy breathed. And then, they learned how to make it choke. They discovered that galactic civilization depended entirely on stability. Trade systems were hyper-efficient but brittle. Supply chains stretched across hundreds of light years with no redundancy. Political systems prioritized consensus, not resilience. Cultural identity in most species was static, rooted in tradition and hierarchy. Change was feared. Disruption was catastrophic. Humans thrived in disruption. The first operations were invisible. Small data manipulations here. Minor logistical delays there. A misfiled contract. A delayed shipment. A corrupted database. No single act caused alarm. But collectively, they created friction, inefficiency, uncertainty. A mining consortium that exploited human colonies suddenly faced delayed or deliveries. Their contracts defaulted. Investors panicked. Stock systems crashed. Political leadership fell under accusations of incompetence. Civil unrest followed. A mercantile empire that had imposed predatory tariffs on Earth-based industries found its trade partners withdrawing. Not through embargo, but persuasion. Carefully planted narratives painted the empire as unstable, corrupt, and dangerous. Trust collapsed. Their markets evaporated. A criminal syndicate that trafficked in labor exploitation suffered internal schisms after targeted information leaks exposed betrayal among its leadership. Loyalty shattered. Infighting destroyed them from within. None of it could be traced to humans. No attack occurred. No violation of law. No trace of warfare. Only probability. Only coincidence. Only collapse. Human strategy evolved rapidly. Each operation refined the next. Every success taught them more about galactic behavior. They learned which species valued honor over profit, fear over loyalty, tradition over survival. They mapped emotional reactions with frightening precision. Psychological warfare became an art. Entire populations could be destabilized through narrative alone. A carefully seeded rumor, timed across multiple systems, amplified through trusted channels, could erode centuries of cultural stability. Humans learned to generate fear, doubt, hope, outrage, unity, and despair on command. Information became their blade. They hacked nothing. They destroyed nothing. They simply spoke, in the right places, at the right times, with the right words. Infrastructure warfare followed. Human engineers infiltrated maintenance networks, transportation protocols, energy routing systems. They inserted optimization algorithms that subtly redirected resources. Over time, entire supply chains flowed through human-controlled nodes. Nothing was seized. Everything was optimized. But once dependency formed, control followed. Human colonies became logistical hubs. Human data networks became navigational backbones. Human systems quietly integrated into the foundation of galactic civilization. By the time anyone noticed, they were indispensable. Economic warfare perfected the method. Humans manipulated markets so delicately that collapse appeared natural. Overproduction triggered price crashes. Artificial shortages inflated essential resources. Currency fluctuations destabilized planetary economies. None of it violated galactic law. It was merely competition. But humans did not compete. They orchestrated. Entire civilizations became chessboards. Trade empires were reduced to pawns. Political alliances shifted without understanding why. No one ever traced the pattern. Meanwhile, humanity rebuilt itself. Education transformed. Children learned strategic thinking before history. Psychology before mathematics. Systems analysis before engineering. Every human grew up understanding complexity, manipulation, resilience, and adaptation. Military academies vanished. Strategic institutes replaced them. Soldiers became analysts. Weapons engineers became system architects. Generals became behavioral scientists. Human identity reshaped itself around survival intelligence. They no longer saw conflict as something to win. They saw it as something to control. Galactic predators slowly learned to fear human territory. Not because of defenses, but because of consequences. Any species that exploited human vulnerability found themselves isolated, destabilized, and economically ruined within cycles. No retaliation ever came. Only collapse. Human colonies became the safest regions in known space. Not due to weapons, but because no one dared provoke them. The Galactic Council observed the shift with mild confusion. They noticed economic anomalies, political instability, market irregularities, cultural unrest. But none of it met the criteria for warfare. No laws had been broken. No treaties violated. No violence recorded. Human suffering, they believed, had simply matured into economic participation. They congratulated themselves. Meanwhile, humanity continued refining its invisible dominance. They built predictive systems capable of simulating entire civilizations. Given sufficient data, they could forecast political collapse decades in advance. They could identify leaders before they rose to power. They could predict revolutions before the first protests formed. They no longer reacted to threats. They preempted them. When galactic criminal networks attempted to reorganize, their financial systems collapsed before their fleets even mobilized. When trade cartels sought new exploitation strategies, their investors withdrew months in advance. When political factions attempted to pass hostile legislation, their public support disintegrated overnight. Humanity did not oppose. They guided. And in guiding they ruled. Yet they remained invisible. Their colonies appeared humble. Their fleets non-existent. Their militaries dissolved. Their people peaceful. Their governments compliant. The galaxy saw only a species that had learned to survive in pacifist civilization. They never saw the strategic intelligence beneath the surface. They never noticed that galactic stability now depended entirely on human systems. They never realized that humanity had quietly become the central nervous system of interstellar civilization. Until the war species returned. Until true violence re-entered the galaxy. And the galaxy discovered that its pacifist paradise had produced something far more dangerous than an army. It had created a civilization that no longer needed one. The first star system fell in under 12 minutes. There was no warning. No negotiation. No demand. One moment, the system transmitted routine trade traffic. The next, all signals went silent. Surveillance drones later captured only debris fields and expanding radiation clouds. Entire planets had been stripped to molten cores. Orbital habitats shattered. Fleets erased before they could even form defensive patterns. The war species had returned. They were ancient beyond recorded history, a civilization forged entirely through conquest. While the galaxy dismantled conflict, they refined it. While others pursued harmony, they perfected annihilation. Their technology did not merely destroy, it erased. Their strategy did not seek victory, it sought extinction. Pacifist defenses collapsed instantly. Without militaries, without tactical doctrine, without psychological conditioning for combat, entire civilizations froze. Leaders hesitated. Councils debated. Laws restricted response. Fleets designed for ceremonial patrol scattered in panic. By the time authorization was granted for action, there was nothing left to defend. System after system vanished. Billions died in silence. The Galactic Council descended into chaos. Their doctrines offered no solution. Their laws prohibited retaliation. Their culture rejected organized violence. Every strategy they possessed relied on negotiation, economic pressure, or diplomatic isolation, none of which mattered to a species that consumed entire solar systems for fuel. The war species advanced unchecked. Trade routes disintegrated. Refugee waves flooded stable regions. Starports collapsed under mass evacuation. Galactic infrastructure buckled beneath panic-driven demand. Entire economies imploded within days. Civilizations that had not experienced fear in millennia discovered it all at once. And they broke. When the Council finally abandoned pacifist law, it was already too late. Their worlds had no standing armies. Their populations had no combat training. Their industry had no weapons production. They had erased war so thoroughly that even the memory of resistance had vanished. In desperation, they turned to the one species that had survived vulnerability. They turned to humanity. The request was simple. Fight for us. Human leadership did not respond immediately. For a species that had been stripped of defense, exploited, dismissed, and ignored, the galaxy's sudden desperation was almost ironic. But humanity did not hesitate out of bitterness. They hesitated out of calculation. Then they accepted. On their terms. Human fleets did not mobilize. No armadas formed. No weapons platforms activated. Instead, data centers expanded. Strategic networks synchronized. Simulation arrays ignited. Humanity did not prepare for battle. They prepared for control. The war species operated on overwhelming force. Massive fleets. Relentless advance. Total destruction. Their strength lay in terror, momentum, and technological superiority. They expected resistance to appear as fleets and fortifications. Humanity offered neither. Their first strike was silence. Human infiltration systems mapped enemy logistics, fuel distribution, resource acquisition, manufacturing chains, communication protocols, command hierarchies. Every dependency was identified. Then disruption began. Navigation errors multiplied across enemy fleets. Supply shipments vanished into misdirected hyperspace corridors. Fuel reserves ran dry at critical moments. Command orders contradicted each other. Entire task forces became stranded in deep space without support. The war species responded with brute force, annihilating nearby systems in rage. But destruction only accelerated their logistical collapse. Each lost system severed additional supply lines. Each act of annihilation deepened their vulnerability. Human psychological warfare followed. False intelligence flooded enemy networks. Reports of betrayal. Fabricated evidence of insurrection. Simulated communications suggesting internal coups. Paranoia spread through enemy command structures. Trust disintegrated. Leaders executed loyal subordinates. Fleets hesitated, uncertain which orders were real. Then came narrative collapse. Human information architects seeded doubt across enemy communication channels, reshaping perception itself. Victories appeared as defeats. Losses appeared catastrophic. Internal propaganda became incoherent. Morale plummeted. Despair infected entire armadas. Humanity never attacked. They isolated. They fragmented. They suffocated. One enemy fleet, cut off from supply and overwhelmed by conflicting intelligence, annihilated itself in civil war. Another surrendered without engagement. Entire battle groups abandoned the campaign, fleeing into intergalactic void. The war species adapted. They decentralized command. Hardened networks. Isolated fleets from external interference. Human strategy evolved faster. Predictive models adjusted. New pressure points were discovered within hours. Every countermeasure was anticipated. Every adaptation neutralized before deployment. The galaxy watched in disbelief. The unstoppable force was slowing. Then it began retreating. The war species attempted a final offensive, gathering their remaining strength into a single colossal armada, aiming to crush humanity directly. They believed humans must be hiding weapons, fleets, superweapons. They prepared for total war. They found nothing. No defenses. No fleets. No fortifications. Only data streams. Human strategy reached its apex. They triggered simultaneous collapses across every remaining enemy support network. Energy production halted. Manufacturing plants failed. Navigation beacons corrupted. Star maps scrambled. Communication systems overloaded with contradictory commands. The armada dissolved into chaos. Ships collided. Fleets scattered. Command disintegrated. And then, quietly, humanity offered terms. Not surrender. Extraction. Safe corridors out of known space. Withdrawal from all inhabited systems. Permanent exile beyond mapped galaxies. The war species hesitated. Then accepted. Because for the first time in their history, they were not losing battles. They were losing reality. The war ended without a single human weapon firing. No planets were glassed by human hands. No fleets destroyed. No soldiers deployed. Only systems redirected. The galaxy stood stunned. Civilizations that had collapsed under the first assault now watched the greatest predator species ever recorded flee without a fight. Entire histories rewritten in weeks. The very definition of warfare shattered. The Council struggled to comprehend what had occurred. They had expected humans to fight. Instead, Humans had unmade war itself. And in doing so, they revealed a truth more terrifying than any weapon. They had not evolved away from conflict. They had evolved beyond it. They had transformed war into pure strategy. And in that realm, nothing could challenge them. The galaxy did not celebrate. There were no victory parades. No declarations of triumph. No monuments raised to commemorate survival. What spread instead was silence. Deep, reverent, unsettled silence. Entire civilizations struggled to comprehend what they had witnessed. Their doctrines had failed. Their beliefs had collapsed. Their understanding of power had been shattered. They had erased war to achieve peace. Humans had mastered war to preserve it. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, their chambers filled not with pride, but fear. They reviewed data from every system, every collapsed enemy fleet, every destabilized command network. There were no weapon signatures. No tactical engagements. No conventional strategies. Only cascading system failures, psychological disintegration, and strategic paralysis. They reached a conclusion none of them wanted to accept. Humanity had not fought. Humanity had controlled. Delegations traveled to Earth, expecting militarization, fortifications, massive defense networks. Instead, they found cities alive with motion, research centers humming with data, schools filled with children learning probability theory, behavioral science, and adaptive reasoning before they learned algebra. No armies. No fleets. No weapons. Just minds. Human leaders met the council without ceremony. No arrogance. No triumph. No bitterness. Only clarity. The council asked the question that haunted them. Why? Why had humans never embraced galactic pacifism? Why had they refused to surrender conflict? Why had they instead refined it into something unrecognizable? The answer was simple. Because humans understood survival. They explained that peace is not the absence of struggle. It is the management of it. That evolution does not remove conflict. It transforms it. Species that erase hardship erase adaptation. Species that eliminate threat eliminate resilience. They told the council that comfort is a temporary condition. Stability is an illusion. The universe is not peaceful. It is indifferent. And indifference will always produce danger. Human history was filled with catastrophe, extinction events, plagues, wars, collapses, natural disasters. They had not survived by avoiding conflict. They had survived by learning from it. Each disaster had refined them. Each failure had strengthened them. Each war had reshaped their understanding of strategy, psychology, and survival. War, to humanity, was never about destruction. It was about preparation. The Council realized the terrible truth. By banning war, they had not ended conflict. They had only delayed extinction. Their civilizations had grown soft, fragile, dependent on perfect stability. Their technology had optimized comfort rather than resilience. Their psychology had rejected fear rather than mastering it. When true danger arrived, they had been incapable of response. Humans had not been different. They had simply refused to forget. Human society had preserved controlled struggle. Simulated crises. Strategic stress. Psychological pressure. Artificial scarcity. Ethical conflict. They had engineered hardship into their own systems, not as punishment, but as training. They had taught their children how to fail, how to adapt, how to rebuild. They had built civilizations designed to bend, not break. The galaxy had built civilizations designed never to be tested. The war species had been that test. And the galaxy had failed. From that moment forward, humanity became something new. Not conquerors. Not rulers. But stabilizers. Galactic infrastructure was redesigned under human guidance. Trade networks gained redundancy. Political systems incorporated adaptive fail-safes. Education shifted toward resilience and crisis management. Psychological training became universal. Entire civilizations learned how to endure uncertainty, stress, and controlled adversity. Human systems quietly integrated into galactic governance. Not through authority, through necessity. Every major civilization became dependent on human predictive modeling, crisis forecasting, and strategic simulation. Human data networks became the nervous system of interstellar society. When instability threatened, humanity intervened long before catastrophe emerged. Wars no longer occurred. Not because humanity prevented them, but because no one could start one. Any attempt at large-scale aggression collapsed before it could begin. Economic systems destabilized. Political support evaporated. Supply networks failed. Morale shattered. No enemy ever reached the battlefield. Humanity had transformed warfare into inevitability management. They no longer defeated enemies. They prevented them from becoming enemies at all. The galaxy slowly understood what they had created. A species that could not be defeated, not because of superior weapons, but because of superior perception. Humanity did not wait for danger. They saw it forming. They did not react to threats. They dissolved them. They did not dominate the galaxy. They stabilized it. And yet, beneath that stability, fear lingered. Because the galaxy knew something fundamental had changed. They had once feared human violence. Now they feared human restraint. They understood that humanity possessed power far beyond comprehension, and chose not to wield it. That choice, more than any weapon, unsettled them. Human leaders never claimed superiority. They claimed responsibility. They reminded the galaxy that adaptation is the core of survival. That evolution is not a path away from struggle, but through it. That peace achieved by weakness is temporary, but peace achieved through preparedness is enduring. They taught that war is not defined by weapons, but by intent. And intent, shaped by intelligence, determines survival. The galaxy learned. Slowly. Painfully. Irreversibly. Civilizations reshaped their values. Cultural myths shifted. Philosophies rewrote themselves. Conflict was no longer demonized. It was studied. Understood. Prepared for. Humanity became the benchmark of resilience. Not because they were strongest, but because they were most adaptable. In the centuries that followed, no existential threat ever reached galactic space. Not because enemies ceased to exist, but because none could outpace human foresight. No species dared challenge a civilization that could dismantle reality itself without lifting a hand. And so, the galaxy finally understood. They had believed humans would avoid war. Humans had adapted instead. They had evolved conflict beyond recognition. They had turned survival into science. They had transformed war into intelligence. And in doing so, they became the quiet architects of peace, not by eliminating danger, but by ensuring that danger never stood a chance.